Thanks for the intro. Morning, everyone. So I'd like to start with a question. When you look at this picture, how many of you think this thought? Not one hand. Oh, one hand. I work with her. So my name's Yalmaz Siddiqui. I'm lucky enough to head up corporate sustainability for MGM, have for 3 years. And I'm going to talk on this subject, which is what's cooked in Vegas stays in Vegas. What you may not know is MGM Resorts represents about half of the Las Vegas Strip. So the message I share about MGM is actually representative of the Las Vegas Strip pretty much as a whole, because a lot of the programs we might start around food waste and food recovery often end up becoming the norm across the city. So we're about half the Strip, 70 million square feet of buildings, 40,000 rooms, 400 restaurants that MGM owns in Las Vegas alone, and lots of banquets. Lots of banquets. So the first thing I want to do is persuade you that Las Vegas has global best practices in food waste management. Global best practices. You don't know this? I hope you know this in 10 minutes, and hope you believe it, because I'm going to do a straw poll again, and let's see if I get more than my colleague putting a hand up. The second is, I presume many of you have seen this hierarchy. If you're in food recovery, you should know this hierarchy, because it really starts with, it's the EPA food recovery hierarchy, source reduction at the top, feed hungry people next, feed animals next, industrial uses such as creating energy next, composting and landfill at the bottom. So that's the hierarchy the EPA has recommended for food recovery, and this is kind of the standard for our space. The second thing I want to do, apart from persuade you that Las Vegas is global best practices, is that there's some nuances to this hierarchy, and that if you, as someone trying to work on food recovery or food waste management, is trying to adhere exactly to this notion of a hierarchy, it's not quite optimal. And I'll illustrate that with this alternative to the hierarchy, which is MGM's version of the hierarchy. And really, it adds a nuance that says this food recovery hierarchy is really a signal to the right cycle for that type of food. So if you can avoid the food waste, avoid it. If you can send back food to its destination, to its source, send it. And then only think about donating food to people if you can donate it safely. If you can't donate it safely to people, then try and donate it to animals. And there's only certain types of food you should donate to animals, should send to animals to feed them, because you want to keep animals safe as well. You don't want to feed them with problematic food stuff. And then if you're using certain foodstuffs like greases and oils to make food, then send it back to make energy. Finally, if none of the above, compost it, but only compost it if it's clean. Because if it's not clean, it's a problem in the compost stream. And then finally, if none of the above, it might be okay to landfill it because you're not meeting any of the ones in the criteria above. So I've got, I'm going to try and persuade you of those two things, that Las Vegas is a global best practice in food waste management, and that the food recovery hierarchy could be thought about in a slightly different way. And I'm going to do so in exactly 6 minutes and 12 seconds through this thing called Pecha Kucha. Who's heard of Pecha Kucha? Everyone. Wow, very good. For those who don't know, Pecha Kucha is a Japanese presentation style in which you've got 20 slides and you've got 20 seconds per slide. Right? So I'm going to go very fast. Ready? Oh, there's a video as well. OK. So this is compostable food waste. Right? Food and disposables together. What's the best approach for this? Source reduction, maybe, yes. You don't want to feed hungry people with this, I don't think. I don't think you want to feed animals. You can't really make anything out of it in terms of oil. Composting is the best. Here's what happens in Vegas. When we have clean compostables only, the bottom image there, when we've got clients who say, we're going to have a composting program, we collect it. We aggregate it, we send it for composting, and then some of it, not all, but some of it comes back to MGM, that's the Bellagio Conservatory. It comes back, our compost becomes fertilizer for the Bellagio Conservatory. One example of what happens in Vegas today. What's the best approach for grease? We don't want to feed hungry people with grease, I don't think. Use grease. We don't want to feed animals. The right use is industrial use. Make it into energy. So here's what happens in Vegas. We aggregate grease and fuel back of every hotel. We send it to turn it into biofuel. And that biofuel comes back to Vegas and is used often in the Clark County School District's buses. So a beautiful circular economy of grease. Number 3, food scraps. Where should you send these? Should you feed hungry people with scraps? You shouldn't. You should use it to feed animals. Here's what happens in Vegas. We aggregate food scraps behind every kitchen, every banquet hall. It gets collected by an operator of pig farms, and then we feed and have fed the happiest pigs in the world in Las Vegas with 5-star gourmet food. We've done that for over a decade. What's the best approach for oyster shells? That's weird. Is it feed hungry people with used oyster shells? No. Is it feed animals? No, they can't eat them. Is it industrial uses? Maybe. Is it composting? Unlikely. So we've decided to send them back to the source. Here's what happens in Vegas, at MGM at the moment, but hopefully other places soon. We collect the oyster shells behind our restaurants. We aggregate them and dry them in the Las Vegas desert. We send them back twice a year to the Chesapeake Bay, and we plant them. They help regenerate oyster habitat. And we've sent back 100,000 pounds of oyster shells. That helps create, we understand through our oyster math, 16 million oysters. So we may be the world's first oyster-positive company. That's the food cycle for oyster shells. This is now an example of a buffet, right? This is why Las Vegas has a reputation as a place of food waste. That's why few people put their hand up. So what's the best approach to managing food and food waste at a buffet? Probably source reduction, yes. Then, if you've got food left over, maybe, if you can keep it safe, feed hungry people. But once it's out in the front, facing the guest, you cannot donate it safely anymore. It's out. It's out of control. So you cannot donate that food that's out in the buffet. Whether if you're at a buffet here or if you go at a restaurant buffet, you cannot donate the food that's already out. You can maybe donate food that's kept in the back, but only if you've got it under very effective time and temperature controls. So here the approach is really when we can safely donate food to people. Chefs take a temperature. We have 3 Square, the main food bank in Las Vegas, come and collect it. We blast chill it, so we get it cool very quickly, and then we freeze it in a true food bank. So we have tens of thousands of pounds of food from MGM sitting frozen in a food bank called 3 Square, and then a charity like Catholic Charities or Salvation Army can look from an inventory and say, we want 10 pounds of chicken, 10 pounds of mashed potato. It's much more controllable. I'm going to show you a quick video, I think, next. No, and also in buffets, we source reduce by, for example, creating smaller plates. So guests don't necessarily take a large amount. We've provided them a smaller dish. OK, let's go to the video to show you that food donation process in action. Because I'm running out of time. Yeah.
Mike Schmidt's career started in the casinos on the Strip almost 2 decades ago. He witnessed a food surplus after big banquets and events and wondered if there was a way to repurpose the food.
We always questioned, why can't we use this food and get it to the homeless and everything else? And it was a matter of figuring out a program and a process in which we could maintain the time temperature controls that we need to have to be maintained in a process so that the food is safe.
A challenge that hasn't been resolved in a standardized way. Fast forward 20 years, Mike works at Catholic Charities now, and thanks to MGM Resorts International and 3 Square, nutritious, wholesome food is being repurposed for the homeless on a regular basis.
MGM Resorts has developed a model with standard operating procedures that allows us to donate food regularly and safely from our kitchens. This kind of food donation is complicated, and that's why we had to develop very detailed standard operating procedures.
The number one priority when donating food is safety. We've put procedures in place to make sure that our temperature is maintained throughout the donation process above 135 degrees.
Each week, we work with 3 Square to let them know the potential opportunities for donation based on the events that are available. 3 Square comes at the time where our meals are breaking down, and they're able to identify the amount of surplus that's left over for them to take back to their facility. 3 Square Food Bank has the facility and the equipment necessary to handle this type of hot food donation.
At 3 Square, when we take receipt of the donation, we bring the food in, we put it into our chill blaster. That chill blaster rapidly takes the temperature down of the food to a safe temperature for storage. Once it comes out, we put it into our freezer. In the freezer, that gives us the opportunity to lengthen the shelf life so it can have second life in the community.
That's where Catholic Charities steps in, prepping the food for clients.
3 to 4 days before, we will naturally thaw that food out in our walk-in refrigerators so that the temperatures are controlled and maintained. And then we will heat it up and serve it to our clients for our community meal. We serve approximately 400 to 600 people every single day, 365 days out of the year. And we will take all the food that can be recovered from MGM.
It's a process that's come full circle for Mike Schmidt.
To be able to see the food being thrown away 18 years ago when I was working on the Strip, to now being able to profit from the recovery of that food through 3 Square from MGM Resorts, it's a huge conclusion of that cycle, and it's now bearing fruit to the point that we all thought it should have back in the day, but there just wasn't that process available back then.
Great, so our goal, thank you. Our goal by the end of next year is to donate 1.7 million pounds of food to hungry people. That's 800 tons of food, equal to 4 blue whales. I skipped over that slide. We've sent the equivalent of 200,000 tons of food waste away from landfill over the last 12 years. That's the equivalent of 1,000 blue whales. So I've got to close. So have I persuaded you of my 2 things? Yes, this is a good way to think about food circularity. Yes or no? Hands up. Good, success. Last obvious question. Yes. Is this true? More than my colleague? Thank you.